conception of how to organize the chapters so that we could tell our shared stories. The topic, democracy and education, has been a lifelong obsession. Correction, actually the democracy part has been lifelong, while the education part didn't take hold until about 50 years ago. Long enough. When we started working on the book, it was a fully joint venture. But along the way, my eyesight got worse and worse. And finally, in April of 2016, when we were really in the midst of it, my eyes more or less gave up. I now have to rely on the kindness of my electronic devices to read to me and write what I dictate orally. In short, much of the work finishing this project has rested in Emily's hands, which were meanwhile also busy with family, her 5-year-old daughter Frankie, and her other work. She deserves credit for all the book's strengths, and none for its weaknesses. Deborah Meier.
Introduction. Emily Gasoi. I met my friend Erin, a 5th-grade teacher in a D.C. public school, for dinner one evening toward the end of the school year. She had come from work and was in an uncharacteristically irritable mood. When I asked her what was wrong, she explained that a high-level administrator from the superintendent's office had visited her school that day and had spoken for 30 minutes or so about best practices he'd observed taking place at a well-known charter school in California. In the classrooms, he explained, he saw students engaged in projects, asking questions, discussing ideas, and excited to talk with him about what they were working on. He saw teachers popping in to observe one another's classrooms. After students left for the day, he observed teachers working together to help one of their colleagues improve an aspect of a lesson with which she was grappling. "These are the kinds of practices," he concluded, "we need to see more of here in D.C. schools." Erin explained that she was overcome with a range of emotions listening to this administrator speak. At first she was filled with hope. Yes, these were the kinds of practices she too knew were best, and she agreed that such a change would greatly benefit the students and teachers in her school. But then her hope faded to the more familiar feeling of frustration, as she remembered the state accountability plan recently passed by the superintendent's office, in which 70% of schools' quality would be based on student test scores, and over half of the evaluation determining whether her salary should reflect that she is a highly effective teacher would also be based on student test scores. The curriculum that Erin is mandated by the superintendent's office to use is 100% aligned with the state test. Erin was left puzzling out how to square the administrator's rousing words with the reality of her daily work within a system that allowed almost no room for her own professional or creative input. Erin's story vividly captures the insidious cross-tide of mixed messages and misguided priorities in which educators find themselves trapped. On the one hand, we are living at a time in which we know more than ever, based on scholarly research and educators' practical knowledge, about how students learn best. Primarily, though not exclusively, through observation, social interaction, play, practice, and experience. And about how organizations change and thrive, which, among other things, depends on the informed engagement and bolstered capacity of those who will carry out the changes, as well as the time and trust required for practitioners to make and learn from their mistakes. But on the other hand, our current education policies, focused as they are on high-stakes, top-down mandates tied to the production of numeric data, reflect none of the best practices that only the most determined innovative schools manage to model, or that research and practitioner knowledge have borne out. In such a system, in which practitioners do not have the right to exercise their own professional judgment, it is hard to imagine how they will model for children, the future stewards of our common weal, what it means to be empowered citizens in a society that is predicated on the lofty premise of being governed of, for, and by the people. We write this book about our experience working in democratic schools.